we have so much uncertainty right now. Tariffs on, tariffs off, tariffs up, tariffs down. Like, it's just crazy, right? Imagine being in a manufacturing business right now and trying to make a decision. So what do? You stop. You don't make any decisions. My theory is if we have a shortage of homes, buyers haven't left the market. They're just standing on the sidelines waiting to see what economy they're going to buy in. We have the largest wealth transfer in history taking place right now. Baby boomers grew up through very, very good economic times. Home values, buying a house for $400 now worth $2.5 million. You know what I mean? Like, their net worth increased by $2 million just by living in a house. That money is already transferring.
We front-loaded a lot of activity in the big cities like Vancouver and Toronto. Why is there a discrepancy between that and the prairies and the Maritimes? Like, how is it that their markets are doing just fine? In fact, prices are going up.
They're not as affected by it. Houses aren't as expensive. It's not such a big deal. They were buying a house in Toronto, Vancouver. It's a big deal. It's a lot of money, right? Oh, what in Nova Scotia? It's not a big deal. Like, think about all the condos in Toronto right now. What percentage are owned by investors? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's like 60 or 70%.
Right, 60, 70%. Think what happens to a market when 60 to 70% of the product are bought by investors, not homeowners. So now all of a sudden, rates go up, mortgages come due, or maybe they can't close or whatever the case is. The rent now, because rates went up, can't cover it. Those same fundamentals aren't happening in all these other places.
Right, the exposure to volatility is much greater.
Much greater, and it drives the market. Probably 120% of effort will only get us 80% of the results right now. Things aren't good all the time, and we got to get used to that. I look at my business with the market being down. Oh, I'm going to be down a little bit this year. It's okay. I've been there before, right? You got to make very prudent decisions during these periods of time. You got to look at everything you're doing, everything you're spending, and say, is that worthwhile? Isn't it worthwhile? The challenge is people sometimes have created a lifestyle that requires the income they used to have.
Yeah, the lifestyle creep in Toronto is insane.
Right. And I'll be honest with you, my business let it control, 20 years ago, I guess I'd say, right? We were there. We were running hard, man. 100 employees.
That's insane.
Oh, it was insane. We had an office in San Diego, an office in Toronto. I had a president, I had a CFO. Just got to keep this machine going. And then if you didn't keep your foot in the gas pedal because you had high overhead, right? My payrolls, at the time, my payrolls, $700,000 a month. Just a wonderful experience because it taught me what I didn't want to do. Everything you own owns a piece of you. You can never forget that. You own 2 cars. Well, those 2 cars own a piece of you. They all need to be fixed. They need to be cleaned. They need to be paid for. You need insurance for 2 of them. You know what I mean? So everything you personally own owns a chunk of you. I don't want any debt. My company has 0 debt. Wouldn't have been the case when I was younger, but we've got to be very, very careful about our lifestyles because, it starts to creep up sometimes, and we think it's going to be like that forever. And guess what? Nothing's forever. Like when things are really, really good, well, just wait, that'll pass. When things are really, really bad, just wait, that'll pass. But get yourself in a position that you can be prepared for anything, no matter what happens. You can weather any storm.
Welcome to Supply and Demand with Adam Nadler. This is a podcast dedicated to the real estate market in Canada, available now on YouTube, Apple Music, and Spotify. And business comes from it, and you can't saturate it.
Yeah.
You can't oversaturate content. It's crazy. It's so cool.
Yeah.
And I was like, and it's so cheap.
Yeah.
We used to spend thousands and thousands a month on SEO and this and that and running a team.
Well, see, the challenge is most people, they want to take the easy way out and they think that's the easy way. And it's not. It's actually the hard way. But people don't see it as that, right? Because they'll do anything. You mean I can just pay you some money and I'm going to get some leads? That's what goes on in their head, right? And they'll spend, $1,000 in trying to generate leads instead of, take some time and try to develop some content, right? So they think it's easy. And almost everybody comes to find it's not, because the conversion of those leads is very difficult, right?
Awful.
You got to be so good at what you do, right, to be able to convert those types of leads. And then half the time you end up with dickheads and people you really don't like working with. But when you're producing content, like it's like our organization, it's like we tend to attract very cool people. Like I can honestly say I don't know if we have a dick rate in our coaching program right now. Like every once in a while we do, but I mean they usually don't last very long because we attract the right people. Because they watch the content, they come to the events, and they either feel good about it or they don't, right? And if they don't, well, we're not for them, and that's cool. So to me, it's almost a bit of a qualifying process, which is really cool, right? Because it's like if you're going to do business for a long time, you want to do business with people you like. Otherwise, I'd rather not do business. I don't want to spend time with people I don't enjoy. People that are, painfully cheap, always trying to negotiate. I got better things to do, right? So that's what's really cool about maybe what Tom has done to a degree, what you're doing to a degree, but that's what's really cool about the LRS, right? Is the LRS, what you're doing is you're bringing value to people you've already dealt with, and you must like them. Because you don't like them, just delete them, get rid of them, right? So but again, it's the work that it requires, right? It seems so easy just to pay somebody to solve all your problems, right?
It's not. And I remember the first time that we ever met, I was so excited to share with you
Mm.
our 1% conversion rate,
Mm.
right? And the whole machine that we had like 15 agents and 2 full-time admin, and we were running volume, and I was convinced, like it's just a money machine and we can just keep pumping it out. Man, oh man, did it make me miserable. But I didn't realize it at the time, but you told me this was like at the side of some
Yeah.
convention center. Like it wasn't even the event. It wasn't the Toronto event that you run. It
No.
was like something else. And you were like, yeah, but if you don't have your LRS, you don't have your security blanket. So you're a trapeze artist with no net,
Right.
And I didn't get what you were saying at the time.
Yeah.
And I remember you asked me a very specific question. You said, like, what do you want?
Yeah.
You said to me, what do you want? And I said, I want to be the best. And you answered to me that I might not want what it takes
Right.
to be the best
Right.
because there's a lot that goes into that people don't appreciate.
Yeah.
And anyways, I didn't appreciate what you were trying to tell me at the time. And now I feel like I do because of the trials and tribulations and going through that and having Bill,
Yeah.
like I owe you a debt of gratitude that I can't even begin to explain.
Yeah.
Like your program has transformed my business. Now I spend 4 months of the year in Costa Rica every year.
Radical.
We're financially stable. We own our own property. We have an investment.
Yeah.
We're totally fine, stable, ready to like build out a family. And before it was like flying by the seat of my pants, not sure what's going to happen next, don't have a reliable, stable base and book of business, and turn and burn on everyone.
Well, it's like running on a treadmill and somebody keeps turning up the speed. That's
That's
what that
exactly what it was.
right? Somebody keeps turning up the speed in that treadmill till all of a sudden you go, "Oh my, really?" Oh, and that's the way I use it as an analogy, right? I said first seems okay, and you know, play the churn and burn game. But the challenge is that treadmill will keep picking up speed if you want to keep doing more business, right? And then it becomes almost impossible to keep up, right? And that actually becomes a full-time job in and of itself, right? Just trying to figure out how do I manage this process? How do I manage this chaos, right? Because there's something called the ceiling of complexity, right? Like we can all do it for a while and then we reach this ceiling, oh my God, like it's out of control, right? Like, and I'll be honest with you, my business let it control, I don't know, 20 years ago, I guess I'd say, right? We were there. We were running hard, man. And, 100 employees. We had a full-time travel agent on staff. I had so many people traveling, doing talks, selling tickets, right? We're doing 13 multi-day events a year. So, like, we were doing 13 Masters Academies a year. That's what we used to do.
That's insane.
Oh, it was insane. Like, we did, 3 in Canada, 9 in the US, 1 in South Africa every year. So, you know, we had an office in San Diego, an office in Toronto. I had a president, I had a CFO. Um, and, to fill those events, see the challenge for us, the treadmill for us was filling the events, right? Because we had speakers on the road that we had setters that would set up talks for them in offices, and we put them on a plane, we send them in, and they spend a week in the city, and they do all these talks, right? And then they fly home, they fly back out again. Um, and it was hard to train those speakers properly so they could convert, and a lot of their compensation was based on conversion. A lot of them burned out because, they're on the road all the time, really hard on them. So again, it was the same thing. We're just trying to keep up, right? Just got to keep this machine going. And then if you didn't keep your foot in the gas pedal because you had high overhead, right? My payrolls, at the time, my payrolls, 700,000 a month,
Jesus Christ.
right? So imagine just your payroll alone is, getting way up there, right? So, and I love the experience. I I cherish that experience because it taught me so much, right? Like I said, that was a character building time for me, right? And I think it was, just a wonderful experience because it taught me what I didn't want to do. And I had to go through that to know what I didn't want to do, right? So, then some things coincided that helped us change that. '08 financial crisis was one of them, and my wife getting sick was number two. So these two things sort of took place at the same time, and and I just thought to myself, "Oh man, I can't do this anymore. Like I got to figure this thing out." And I'll tell you, the hardest thing to do, probably like when you left your team, um, the hardest thing to do is to get smaller. It's easier to grow than it is to shrink, because when you're shrinking, because then I got to close down San Diego, and I had to lay off a lot of employees. And when you're doing all that, every decision you're making is not fun. Like every conversation you're having is not fun. Like growing is fun, right? Because we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, we're all excited. But when you're going the other way, like okay, now I got to deal with the lease of San Diego. How am I going to handle that? Right? Are we going to sublease the property? How's the landlord going to handle that? I got to fly to San Diego and tell all the staff that we're not doing as many events anymore. Like just one thing after another. They were very difficult and not energy giving tasks. So that becomes the greatest learning of all. Right. So I always think to myself now in my mind, I go, listen, if we're going to take something on, we have to know we have the capacity to take it on in a way that we're not going to burn everybody out, because it's easy to say yes, right? We got to decide what you're going to say yes to, because ideas are a dime a dozen. Like people are saying, oh, you guys should do this. You guys should do that. You guys should do it. I say, yeah, we could do them all. Right. And I'm not saying they're bad ideas. It's just that every organization has a certain capacity. And depending what you want to do, right? If you want to turn it up, then, I used to walk in my office in Markham, after being away for a week down in San Diego. I'd see two new faces. I knew who they were, right? I'd go over and introduce myself to them, and who they were. So, but I think that's the exciting part of life. That's the adventure, right? I always say life's a really cool adventure. I would say family's a gift, business is a game, and life's an adventure. That's the way I look at it. So business is sort of my game, if you will. A lot of people play tennis, pickleball, Monopoly, whatever. They're all games, right? And when everybody's playing a game, what they're trying to do is challenge themselves. Against the game, in golf, you're challenging yourself in most cases against the course, unless you're playing somebody. Pickleball, you're challenging yourself against your opponents, right? So it's so funny in life that what we tend to do is we want to have games. Like, so when we got nothing to do, we play a game, right? But a lot of people don't look at their business that way. And I look at business that way. I say business is just a game. So treat it like a game. It's going to be challenging, right? It's going to stimulate you. You're going to be faced with problems. Sometimes you're going to hit the ball well. Sometimes you're not going to hit the ball so well. But what brings you back to all the other games we play is a challenge, right? So to me, that's the way I look at things. I go, listen, family's a gift. We all know that. We don't have to go there. And then treat business like a game, because when you have that mindset, you think differently about it, right? You think about the challenges you're faced with, and okay, well, these are my learning experiences. This is where I'm going to learn the most. This is where I'm going to build my character. This is where I'm going to gain immense amounts of wisdom, so that when I get forward and look back, I'll make better decisions because of what I went through, right? And then life is this amazing adventure, right? All these things that happen in your life as you move through. So I've always found that if I could look at it that way, um, it helps me through, right? And to some degree, it's why, people say, well, when are you going to retire? I say, well, not even thinking about that, right? Like, I don't know, what do I retire to? My life's good the way it is. Like, I like what I do. Yeah, it's good, right? So, build a life and business that, you never want to retire from. That's sort of a cool thing. I'm not saying I won't retire. I'm just not even thinking about it right now. Maybe I'll change my mind tomorrow. Maybe I'll change my mind in 5 years. I don't know, right? Maybe circumstances will change my mind. But, to me, that's the way to build things. Build them so you love it all, whatever you're doing. And like, think about when you were churning and burning with online leads. Well, you weren't loving it.
No, it sucked.
That sucked. And we all can do that for a while, right? But at some point, it's going to win. We're not going to win, right? At some point. Some people can endure it longer than others, but that's why I'm such a believer in relationships. I'm such a believer in LRS, because I understand the lifetime value of a relationship, right? You say, okay, we got the tools to figure all that out, but you look at the lifetime value of a relationship, it's pretty amazing in real estate or in my business, right? Like over 60% of our business comes from referrals. You mentioned Tom's story. I don't know how many clients Tom's referred to us, a lot, right? And so he's been so imagine the lifetime value of that relationship I have with, I'm just mentioning Tom because you know him. There's many other people like that as well, but think of the value of that lifetime relationship.
So it's so, I guess it's a huge privilege to like have someone like you in the chair. Um, and it's not often that I have someone who's like, co-founder, CEO of a multinational, huge, you know, business like yours that's been built over decades. Um, and I was like really thinking about like, well, what would I want to ask you? I was like thinking about that because I wasn't really sure. And as I was driving over this morning, I was thinking, I'd love to know, just in your perspective, what were the best what was the best business decision you've ever made, and what was the worst business decision you've ever made, and why?
Hmm. Best business decisions I've ever made in my life is I've always had somebody that was really good at everything I wasn't good at. And I didn't make it out of, reading the book or being really smart. It just sort of happened. So let me take you back to when I was in real estate as an example. Dana Richard and I, who still runs our coaching division today, we've been together for get close to 40 years, believe it or not, right? In one capacity or another. Well, we started a real estate company together when I was 27 years old. And even when we started it, I didn't know the unbelievable advantage he brought to me and the unbelievable advantage I brought to him. Because I was always a good front guy. I was always a good sales guy, meet with people, and I'm not really good at sitting at a desk. And, even to this day, I'm not. Like, I can't sit at my desk for any more than a few hours. And, so I plan my days accordingly, sort of thing. It just doesn't work for me. Well, he's exactly the opposite. He's like Mr. Detail, right? He manages the books, he managed the money, he managed the details. He managed the staff that looked after all of the deals and things like that, so that I could go out, either sell real estate, recruit agents, whatever the case is, right? Like just be out there socially and meeting with everybody. And it was probably 3 or 4 years after that I realized, oh my God, we work really well together. Like I don't think Dana and I have ever had a fight like in 40 years. Like we've had lots of great conversations and we debate all the time. We still do. Like Dana, I have a call with him every Monday, and he, I just want him to tell me anything, right? Like, what are you thinking? Like on an impact call example, he'll bring something up, but he says, I don't know if you should be talking politics on those calls, right? And I said, you're right. I shouldn't. I'm glad he told me, right? And because there's no need to, right? That's the whole thing. It's not going to benefit the call, and it might take away from the call. So why would you do anything that isn't necessarily going to benefit the call and is going to take away from the call? So he's like that with me, and he now runs our coaching division, as you know. He hires, trains, sell our coaches. But then what was really interesting is, so then when I sold that company, so Dana left a few years before I sold it because he wanted to move back home, right? His wife didn't like living, in Markham and all that sort of stuff. So
Where's he from?
he's originally from Peterborough, but then he moved to Cloyne, which is north of Ottawa. It's not far off the Quebec border, but that's where he spent his summers, and that's where his wife's from. So he went up there and he built a house, and he's lived up there ever since. He still lives there, and he became a teacher for a while. Like he's a very educated guy. Like Dana's got more letters behind his name than I have in my name. But anyway, so he became a teacher for a while, and then when I started RRI, I needed a coach. Well, I think there can't be a better coach in the world than Dana Richard, right? So I called him up. And it took me a little while, 6 or 7 months. We talked, and finally he said, okay, let's do it, right? So he's been with me ever since. But when I started RRI, I knew I needed a partner because I know that I can go sell. Like, I started doing talks all over the place. And in talks, I was selling tickets to events or selling coaching, whatever it was. I've always believed that it's better to sell to many than it is to one, right? So I could do that through speaking. And, but I needed somebody to handle my wife. So we started the company together. So I would say by accident, the best decision I made was Dana being my partner at the real estate company, and the best decision I made with RI is my wife's my partner. There would be no RI at the levels of that today without Sue. Not a possibility, right? So that was probably the best decisions I've ever made in business, is realizing that I have very, very few strengths, right? And I have a lot of weaknesses. And so if I want to grow, scale, whatever you want to call it, I have to surround myself with people that are good at the things that I'm not good at. And I got to stay in my lane and get the hell out of their way and let them do their job. It doesn't mean you don't have meetings. It doesn't mean you don't know what's going on. It doesn't mean you don't have reporting systems, because we do. But that's, I think, the number one strength of the old company and this one, is that we're surrounded by people that are really, really good. Like customer service, Dana Stroud, Dana Stroud, like, she loves people. She just wants to help people. You call with an issue, she'll solve that issue, right? She's really good at those sort of things. Biggest mistake, and God knows there's many, right? And I mean many, many mistakes. The biggest mistake that I think that I made in the company was probably trying to grow too fast, bringing in senior people, okay, that were more educated than I was, MBAs, and thinking they knew more than me. That was probably the biggest mistake, because I started to rely on them in terms of visionary decisions, right? Because I'm going, well, what do I know? Right? Like, I left college after 2 months, not because I graduated early, you know what I mean? So what the hell do I know about building this organization? So I brought in professional managers, if you will, and I relied too much on them. And in most cases, they were right, but in most cases they were wrong, right? And by following that path, some challenging times were ahead. So what I have learned from that is, if there's going to be a mistake made, I want to be the one that makes it, right? Because now I can be responsible for it. And I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, they think, oh, who am I, right? You know what I mean? What do I know, right? As you start to grow. And I think to myself, you know more than you think. Depend on yourself. Believe in yourself, right? And that doesn't mean you're not going to make mistakes. And that doesn't mean you don't listen to other people. I'm not suggesting that at all. But you make the decision. You call the play, because it's your business. And that was some of the mistakes I made. I wasn't calling all the plays. I was depending on other people to make those decisions, thinking they knew more than me.
So you're talking about taking on willingly and emphatically taking on responsibility and being accountable solely yourself as a business owner.
100%. Instead of turning the responsibility of somebody else to think they're going to solve all the problems, right? And stepping back. And that's sort of what happened. And I didn't step back not working. I just stepped back, wasn't involved in operations. Like an example was, cash flow. We never used to have cash flow statements. And all of a sudden, we had a cash flow crunch one time, which is not uncommon for a business, right? You had lots of money coming in. You just didn't have enough right now, right? That sort of thing, right? And I remember when that happened, I thought to myself, like, this is stupid. I shouldn't be finding out today that we got a cash problem in 4 days, right? So then from that, I implemented 6-month cash flow projections, so that, every month I got a 6-month cash flow projection. So now I could foresee a problem, and then I could fix it. You give me 6 months, I could fix it. You give me 4 days, right? So, that's what I mean, is that, some of the things were starting to happen. I just felt, oh, that's not right. And to a large degree, I had removed myself from having the proper reporting systems, right, in place, and thinking they know the right answers. And believe me, they had a lot of right answers. They all do. But I say, as the owner of the company, you got to call the play. It's your job to call the play. Get all the information you want, but then you call the play.
And you're a high green type personality like myself.
Right.
And you love numbers. I mean, so do I. I'm a
Mm.
huge numbers nerd.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of really cool stuff that you went over yesterday on our members call, which was like, I don't know, there's like 700 people on it
Yeah.
from all over the country.
Yeah.
It was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And the second half of it, you were kind of really giving us a bit of a motivational boost,
Right.
if you will, which I really loved, because you're not somebody who's been shy in the past about talking about the ups and the downs in your own life.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like just struggling out
Uh,
there right now, not just people in our industry,
yeah.
but people all over the place. And you've openly talked about it at events how you struggled and battled depression, a lot of stuff that a lot of people, just struggle with silently
Yeah.
here. And as someone who, like, I sit on the board of a mental health charity.
Yeah.
Me and my brother, my family's really big on mental health. So that's what we do. And we try to destigmatize it as much as possible and talk about it.
Hmm.
And entrepreneurs being like really the lifeblood of an economy,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And small businesses in Canada really being, you know, kind of the engine that moves us forward, especially in the light of, tariffs and whatnot and all other kind of global macro trends. Like, what would you say to those people right now who are listening? Thank God we just monetized literally today. We're like over 1,000 subs. We're like moving forward. We've got our watch time hours. To those people who are listening, who are entrepreneurs, um, who are struggling right now or finding it just like hard to find the motivation, like what would you say to them?
Well, first of all, until I experienced depression, which was 15 years ago, maybe it's quite a while ago now, maybe 17 years ago, I didn't understand why anybody would ever be sad. Like I didn't get it. Like, I'd say, hey, read a good book, tell yourself, do affirmations, like get over it, and that honestly, that's what I would have said because I had never experienced it. I didn't get it. So I think for people who've never had it, it's really hard to understand what somebody can be going through. But when I got it, it was real. Like when I say real, it wasn't about reading a positive book or listening to, you know, a podcast or something. Like I was incapacitated, you know, lost 30 pounds. My body always felt like it was vibrating and all those sort of things. So to some degree, again, I look at everything as experience and I think it was the most difficult pain I ever experienced in my life. Right. But what we have to realize is that when we're depressed or when we're overly anxious, like we're all going to have moments where we're a little sad, that sort of thing. But I mean, when it's clinical, then you got to get help. You have to get help because listen, if you fell down and broke your ankle, you'd go get it fixed. Well, if you're dealing with mental health issue, why wouldn't you get it fixed? It's a health issue. And that's what I came to realize. But again, before I wouldn't have thought that. So I would say the first thing you got to do is you got to reach out for help. You got to talk to people. And don't be afraid to tell people. It's not a weakness. Like, I think people look at it like I know I used to look at it and say, "Oh my God, if you got, mental health, well, you don't want to tell anybody because everybody's going to think you're weak." And that's what I used to think. And that's not the case, right? You're just dealing with a health issue. So get that health issue fixed. So I would say, and listen, the chat GPT day, you could go on really fast and say, okay, I'm dealing with, depression or anxiety, market's a little bit off right now. I'm not making as much money as I want. I'm a little worried about my future, whatever the case is, you know what I'm saying? Whatever the case is and say, what are some of the solutions to that? And it'll come up with great 10 points like that. Right. And then you got to work on it. No different than you'd work on a broken ankle. Like you got to work on it. And that's what I had to do. I had to work on it. Right. Now I was surrounded by great people. My wife was incredibly helpful, and I was honest with her. Dana Richard, incredibly helpful. He drove all the way down. We had a meeting in my house, and I needed him to start making some decisions because I couldn't make them. Right. My parents were incredibly helpful. Dr. Elaine Chin, incredibly helpful. Connie Wong, my psychiatrist or psychologist, I should say, incredibly helpful. Um, all the books I read, Byron Katie's books, Broken Open, like I still have it sitting on my shelf with all the stickers in it, and the yellows and all those. Probably read it 5 times, right? Because I believe that like awareness to me is the first step in change. And when I say awareness, when people start to help you understand what you're going through and why you're going through it, that's awareness, and that brings a little bit of peace in of itself. They go, okay, yeah, I get it. Okay, I understand more, right, about why this is going on. I had chemical imbalances in my life. My cortisol was out of whack, right? Like all this sort of stuff. So I had to go get that checked. And I said, what do I need to do to get that up? And we all know that, if you're feeling a little down, to me, one of the greatest things you can do is exercise, right? So I say, everybody, if you're feeling a little down, give yourself 60, 90 minutes in the morning and don't look at your phone. Don't get into your emails. That's just going to bring you down. I mean, put on a exciting podcast or music and go for a walk for 60 minutes. Like give yourself a mental break. Like that sort of thing. That's what you got to do. You got to start to break away. They took my phone away from me when I had it for 2 weeks. Because if I looked at my phone, it would just, it just dive me back down again because I could see all the things I need to deal with, right? And I didn't have the capacity to deal with that. So it's a very, very difficult thing. I know a lot of people don't like to talk about it. I'm really glad you're doing what you're doing with your brother because I think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And I need to do more of that, to be honest with you. And I've just talked to my wife in the last 2 weeks about that. But yeah, I'd say that's what you got to do, man. You got to, just look at all the things you could do. Chat GPT will tell you. And then I said, man, get some help, get some help, get some help. Right.
Well, if anybody's listening and you're local to the GTA, Toronto, especially Richmond Hill, Home on the Hill is a local charity. It's a mental health charity. We provide services for caregivers who, oh man, those people are strained and stressed out because dealing with people with mental health issues is like its own issue. So we provide that and services for people who have mental health issues, but it's really good. Like even just the support groups, man, are just like
Oh,
awesome. So we love that. So check them out. Home on the Hill. We're super easy to find. Um, and I've like just to kind of get technical for a second because I watched what you were saying yesterday, and it's not usual for me to have somebody here who has such a breadth of perspective on the Canadian market. You're servicing clients of yours, coaching clients all over the country and in other countries. So you're really seeing things from a bird's eye perspective, whereas like we're so hyper focused on our own market here that sometimes it's hard to, take a step back. And what I noticed is you were giving the numbers, and it looks like Toronto, Vancouver not doing very well.
right.
The prairies in the maritime provinces,
Yeah.
they're doing great.
Yeah.
So what the hell is actually going on? Because I've had people on here who are just like it's all doom porn all day, which is kind of good for YouTube. But like, what's the real scoop from a bird's eye perspective as you see it?
I think the number one fundamental that we need to all understand to understand the real estate market is we have a systemic shortage of houses in Canada. Okay. We've had it for years. That has not gone away. People are still here. Where have all the people gone? Nowhere, right? Like, and there's still people coming in because we had high immigration for a number of years, right? So if you look at that, that is the fundamental problem that we've had in the real estate market. So if that hasn't gone away, then what the hell's going on? Okay. Well, what's going on is that you got to remember, and I can go back in history and look at this. Happens every time. Toronto, Vancouver, when they get hot, they get really hot.
Oh yeah, ripping hot.
Right? Prices start going up 15% a year, 12% a year, 20% a year, whatever. Well, that's not happening in the Maritimes. That's not happening in the prairies, right? Maybe in Calgary once in a while, but generally that's not happening. So what happens is we have peaks and valleys. They have rolling hills. You see? So that's fundamentally the difference as to why we don't see it change as much, right? So what's happening here is we're resetting in Ontario and BC a little bit. But the reset's not going to last for a long time. Now, is it 2 months? Is it 6 months? I don't know the answer to that, right? But it's not going to last for a long time. And the reason it won't last for a long time is that, first of all, another huge issue a lot of people don't understand is that we have the largest wealth transfer in history taking place right now in Canada, okay? Because baby boomers are very flush. Let's just say that, okay? Because baby boomers grew up through very, very good economic times. They really did, right? Like we had a 30-year run that was unbelievable. Starting businesses and home values, buying a house for $400s. Now we're 2.5 million. You know what I mean? Like their net worth increased by $2 million just by living in a house. And we can go on and on. So they're sitting with all this money right now. And Benjamin Tull, I can't remember what the number is, but it's a big number. He told me one day what the number was, and that's a massive number. Well, that money's all going to transfer over to other generations. right? So that money is already transferring because they say that 42% of people that are buying their first home are getting a gift from somebody, right? Baby boomers probably, right? Because they got all the money. And they're sitting there and they got tons of equity. A lot of them don't even have mortgages and got a bunch of money in the bank. And they also probably go, well, what if I got another 15 or 20 years? I don't need all the money I got, or I don't need all the equity, or whatever the case is. I might as well gift my kids now. And it is becoming trendy to gift people before death. See, if I go back to when I was a kid, my parents would have never thought of giving us any money before they passed. That wasn't normal. Like literally, my parents never gave me a dollar, right? My dad let me $500 one time, and I had to pay back. I can't remember. It was like $50 a week or something until I paid him back. And that was it. That was the extent of what I got. Now, my mother's still alive. My father passed away about 5 or 6 years ago. But, my siblings won't see anything from the estate until, obviously my mom passes, right? That was the way it was. It's not like that anymore. Like, parents now are saying, well, I need to help my kids, especially with some of the home prices. So we have a wealth transfer taking place. We've got a shortage of homes. Supply and demand drives prices all the time. First rule of economics. So then you say, but then why has the market slowed down? Well, it's slowed down because, we have so much uncertainty right now. First of all, we didn't have a rate drop last time. We had like 7 rate drops in a row, right? So rates are starting to come back to what I would consider a reasonable rate, interest rates. We'll probably end up with another couple drops this year because based on what the Bank of Canada talked about recently, they know that, our economy's not chugging along so well right now with this trade war we got on with the U.S. So my theory is if we have a shortage of homes, buyers haven't left the market. They're just standing on the sidelines waiting to see what economy they're going to buy it right now. And by the way, if I was a smart buyer, I'd be buying now. Right, I'd be buying in the next few months because I think that could be the best time to buy, right, in the next few months. I might be wrong by a few months, but that's sort of, if I was a buyer, I'd be this let's go. Real estate's on sale right now. It's time to get in. Let's go, right? And I'll tell you, 5 or 10 years from now, you're going to look back and people are going to think you're a genius, right, by making that move. Because when's the best time to buy? When nobody else is buying. When's the best time to sell, right? Same thing, right? So that's what's happening. So we have a systemic shortage of homes in Canada. And I hope that the Canadian government comes to a trade deal with the U.S. I think because we have now Carney in place, who, by the way, was the governor of Bank of Canada, governor of Bank of England, right? Very educated when it comes to finance. I'm hoping he's going to see the damage that's being done from the uncertainty of not knowing what the hell is going on with the U.S. Right? Like, tariffs on, tariffs off, tariffs up, tariffs down. Like, it's just crazy, right? So everybody was sitting around going, like, imagine being in a manufacturing business right now and trying to make a decision. So what do? You stop. You don't make any decisions until you have certainty. So I would say, I would suggest, I don't know, maybe in my lifetime, it's the highest level of uncertainty that I think people have ever felt. So what do? Stop. That's why our market's been slow. Now, it doesn't take much to turn that around. So rate or 2 decrease, maybe a trade deal or even talk of a trade deal, or something more definitive, if you know what I'm saying. And also guess what starts to go again because we have a systemic shortage of houses in Canada. So that's the underlying fundamental that we all have to realize. And I think then the market would actually start to, it's not going to go crazy anytime soon, but it's going to start to move the other way.
So we kind of like front loaded, I guess Benjamin Tal mentioned this at your event, that like we front loaded a lot of activity.
Right. We did.
And during COVID, and now we're, kind of paying the piper.
Right.
In the big cities like Vancouver and Toronto. But why is there a discrepancy between that and the prairies and the Maritimes? Like, how is it that their markets are doing just fine? In fact, prices are going up.
Yeah.
And then in our world, it just feels like a different country, but it's not.
Right, because they're not affected by it. They go on with their lives. Houses aren't as expensive. It's not such a big deal. They were buying a house in Toronto, Vancouver. It's a big deal. It's a lot of money, right?
Mm.
Oh, go to Nova Scotia. It's not a big deal. Like, it's not, you're not taking on this massive, massive, massive debt, if you will, right? And And if you go back in history and you look at BC and Ontario, it always happens the same way. So when we decide to take off, we take off. Everybody starts to jump in. Opportunity, right? Oh my God, we got to get in the market. We got to make a whole bunch. Like think about all the condos in Toronto right now. What percentage are owned by investors? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's like 60 or
Right,
70%.
67%. So that means 60 or 70% of all the condos in Toronto were bought by investors. So now all of a sudden, rates go up, mortgages come due, or maybe they can't close or whatever the case is. So the rent now, because rates went up, can't cover the rent. So what are they going to do? Sell them.
So, yeah.
So now they sell them. Well, those same fundamentals aren't happening in all these other places. You know what I'm saying? And what I'm talking about Toronto is no different than Vancouver. So everybody's jumping in, jumping in, jumping in, jumping in. Think what happens to a market when 60 to 70% of the product are bought by investors, not homeowners.
Right. The exposure to volatility is much greater.
Much greater, and it drives the market. It
Right.
drives prices up.
Mhm.
So our prices go, woo, right? Where you look at, pick Halifax as an example. Well, they're just going along. They're going up a little, right? Things soften. They might soften a little. And I do think over the next couple months, I'm not convinced sales are going anywhere. Like, Bill, your coach talks about this all the time. Like, I'm sorry, it wasn't Bill. It was Sean McCann said it. But, probably 120% of effort will only get us 80% of the results right now. And that's okay. Like, things aren't good all the time. You know what I mean? And we got to get used to that. Right? Like, I look at my business with the market being down. Oh, I'm going to be down a little bit this year. Right? I'm not worried. It's okay. I've been there before. Right? You got to make very, prudent decisions during these periods of time. You got to look at everything you're doing, everything you're spending, and say, is that worthwhile? Isn't it worthwhile? So I'm not overly concerned about the market. I think there's always a reset, and for us to expect it to be good all the time, the challenge is people sometimes have created a lifestyle that requires the income they used to have.
Yeah, the lifestyle creep in Toronto is insane.
Right? And and by the way, I've learned the hard way about that too. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that I've never had that problem. I've had that problem, right? I remember when I was in real estate, I think the first year in 100, I probably spent 150, right? Like, you know what I mean? So we've all been there, but what I've discovered is that everything you own owns a piece of you. And you can never forget that. You own two cars. Well, those two cars own a piece of you. They all need to be fixed. They need to be clean. They need to be paid for. You need insurance for two of them. You know what I mean? So everything you personally own owns a chunk of you a little bit. If you got a second house, you got a boat, all those sort of things. And so the way I look at it is I've now, through my own mistakes, right? And now because of my age and I'm dealing with more experience allows me, but I just go, like, I own everything myself, right? Like I don't want any debt. Like our company has zero debt, right? Like we can survive forever sort of thing. Now, again, I'm older. That wouldn't have been the case when I was younger, but we've got to be very, very careful about our lifestyles because, yeah, it starts to creep up sometimes. And we think it's going to be like that forever. Well, guess what? Nothing's forever. Like when things are really, really good, well, just wait. That'll pass. When things are really, really bad, just wait. That'll pass. But get yourself in a position that you can be prepared for anything, no matter what happens. You can weather any storm. Right?
That's such an interesting concept of like kind of being market proof in a way.
Yeah.
And the thing that I really like about the way that you speak is in your company, you guys kind of marry the technical with the intangibles,
Hmm.
right? Like when we're talking technically and we're kind of going through numbers and nerding out on that stuff, which I love. It's really interesting. But then half of it is talking about the intangibles that you can't quite necessarily measure,
Hmm.
but have a massive impact on the things that you do measure. So, for example, relationships, which when I asked you what your biggest mistake was and what the best decisions you've ever made, it was all you said talked about was
Yeah.
relationships, which I found fascinating.
Yeah.
And you've now, I mean, like the guys that you're friends with are like Joe Polish, Wes Brown, like Michaels, right? Like it's like all these guys that are just powerhouses, and every time that you mention a book, I always write it down and I always add it to my Audible, and I'm still making my way through a few of them. But one of the best recommendations you ever gave me was Joe Polish's book,
Yeah.
which is What's in It for Them,
Yeah.
which is a fantastic book. And then you ended up joining the Genius Network. You're friends with them. Like, these are your buddies.
Yeah.
Like, what's that like?
Yeah. To be honest with you, they're just normal people. And I say that respectfully because they're very successful. Like the Genius Network is full of really, really successful people. Like you can be sitting beside a guy who's like a billionaire and you don't even know, right? Like it's super weird sometimes because they don't look like a billionaire, if you know what I'm saying, right? You wouldn't have a clue. And then you start to have a conversation. And, oh, really? You do what? You own how many companies, right? Which is really cool. But what I have found is that, like Joe Polish philosophy is that, if you want to build relationships, then you got to think about what can I give, not what can I get. That's his fundamental philosophy, right? If you meet somebody, don't be thinking, what's in this for me? Think, what can I do to help them? How can I help? How can I help? How can I help? And that's how Joe Polish has built all these relationships, right? Like he said, dinner with Bill Clinton, and I can go on, it's crazy. Richard Branson, he's been on Richard Branson's island, all that sort of thing. And the reason he went to Richard Branson's island, because he helped him raise, I think it was over $100 million for one of his charities or something. Like it wasn't 100, it was a really big number, but I think he said over $100 million. And of course, so he helped him do that, right? Well, because of his giving starts receiving, as we always say. Now he's got this great relationship with him. So what I find about these people, and again, not all of them, but the people that I'm attracted to, is they're always thinking about long-term relationships. And they're just like, it's almost, they look at you and say, how can I help? So here's another example. Evan Carmichael. You know who Evan Carmichael is.
Sorry, I said Michaels. I meant Carmichael.
Carmichael, yeah. So he's got what, 4 million subscribers on YouTube or some crazy number, right?
Mhm.
And he's a celebrity in his own world, in the YouTube world. He's an absolute celebrity.
Totally.
So anyway, I see him at the airport one day. He's a genius, right? And I see him at the airport and we get chatting. Next thing we're sitting beside each other in the plane, which was a bit of a fluke, right? Like, and we're flying back. And we're talking away. He's on his computer, doing a little bit of work or something. And so anyway, I asked him a question or something, and it was something about YouTube. And he goes, well, let's see. Next thing is on my YouTube site, which is weak. I know that. Like, we've always been event marketers, relationship marketers, and we're getting a little better at that now. But he's on there and he's giving me all these ideas and all that sort of thing. And then you go, well, who do you think has a good YouTube account that's sort of in your coaching program? And the first person that came to mind was Tom Story, right? I go, well, geez, Tom's doing a pretty good job. So the next thing is on Tom's. He goes, he can make some minor changes and this thing would blow up. And I said, really? I said, is there any way you would talk to him? Yeah. Well, within a week, Tom's at his house, Evan's house. He went to Evan's house. And they're sitting there together and Evan's helping him out. Like, that's the type of people these are, right? Like, so we see them and think we put them up in this pedestal and, oh, they don't have time for me. And, this, and it's not true at all. Exactly the opposite. I find that environment, they couldn't be more helpful. But I think that's why they're successful, right? I really do. And I know Evan, I'm sure he makes a lot of money from YouTube. I don't know what it would be, but he's helping Tom for nothing, helping me for nothing. I said to him, you come to my event and speak at my event. And what you're speaking for? I don't know. I'll come and do it. You have to pay me. I go, what? I said, well, I want to pay you. No, I wouldn't take your money. You're a part of the Genius Network. You're a buddy of mine. I'll be there. Things like that. And then Evan sends me a video for my birthday. It was pretty funny. It's something about you remind me of Iron Man for some reason. It was a joke, right? It was an absolute joke. And I said, well, this stage of my life, how old I am, I wouldn't mind some of Iron Man's parts. I said to him. But anyway, we're joking away. But, think about this guy, and he's sending me a birthday video, right? Of course, I'd send him I've had him to my house for dinner. So all I'm saying is that I find them to be very normal. And I find that all they want to do is they want to have an impact and they want to contribute. And I think that's the number one mindset, right? They're very purposeful in what it is they do. They want to help. How can I help? How can I help? How can I help? How can I help? And I'm not sure if maybe people that are less successful know that, right? Because they're trying to drive, do deals, make it happen, all that sort of thing. And when I see all these people, like Joe Polish is brilliant at building relationships. Evan Carmichael is brilliant building relationships, right? Les Brown, we had him speak at the event. You were probably there when we had the event. Like, you know what I mean? Like, And I can go on and on. Like Brian Tracy is another guy that I met many years ago, like a super, success in the speaking world. I don't know if you know who Brian is or not, but oh no, you should Google this guy. He's like a Les Brown. He's actually born in Edmonton, but he now lives in California. And I reached out to him when I had an office in San Diego. Next time I have him dinner with Brian and his wife, Barbara. In my mind, he's like, I'm sitting with Brian Tracy.
I mean, that's kind of how I feel right now,
Yeah.
frankly. I feel like I'm learning this very lesson right now where, I am curious of how these relationships are made.
Yeah.
And then I'm now realizing like, man, why don't I just reach out to people? So,
Sure.
like I reach out to you
Yeah.
and you're freaking sitting in my office right now. Like that's the coolest thing ever.
My theory is this, and I've always been, I'm not going to say aggressive, but I've always been a little bit assertive in my reach outs, right? I don't mind reaching out to people. Like
Mhm.
that's how I ended up, like Brian Tracy was a cold reach out, right? And, and when I reached out to him, like he's very old now, right? But back then he was still traveling all over the world speaking, and I think he's written 30 some books. And I just happened to be in San Diego, and I found out he was in San Diego. All right, so I'm going, oh, yeah, how could I get some time with him and all that? And I got his assistant on the phone and said, I've got this business, sales training business and all that. And is there any way, I could get Brian to do we used to have these calls. We used to record these calls. I can't remember what they're called now. And I'd love to get him on. And she goes, well, let me talk to him. And then she phoned me back. So he's wondering about this one. And I answered all the questions. Like saying, okay, I'll do it. Oh, wow. And then, as I said, after we finished the recording, he says, well, is your wife here? I said, well, she's not, but I'm going to be back in a couple of weeks with my wife. He goes, well, then let's go for dinner. So we end up going to a steakhouse for dinner with Brian and Barbara. Like, I'm sitting there going, how the hell did this happen? Right? Sort of thing. So I think that's what we have to realize is they're just ordinary people and they really do want to help. Not all cases, but most cases. And again, we're attracted to people that are like us. Right. And relationships has always been really, real important to me. Like, my wife, my kids, obviously, right? Like, I don't think there's anything more important in the world than having great relationships. And, we were talking earlier that, over 60% of our business comes from referrals from our clients.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a pretty big number, right? And we talk to the team all the time. And I said, that's, because hopefully we're doing a lot of the right things and we're building these relationships. We want to be a company that's really easy to do business with, right? As you know, somebody decides to leave our coaching program, we don't hold them. We call it red carpet exit. That's red carpet them out to make them feel really good about their decision. Even though we might not agree with their decision, that's okay. They've made their decision, and people make decisions for their reasons, not my reasons, right? And I have to realize that. And what's crazy, when we red carpet them out, they're so comfortable. So a lot of them are back within 6 months, right? Because they're going, oh yeah, I want back in and all that sort of stuff. And that's maintaining and building a relationship. For most people, somebody leaves your business, okay, see you later. You're an asshole. You don't know what you're talking about. You shouldn't stay. And we take it as some form of rejection. But it's not about us. It's about them. They made a decision for their reasons, not my reasons, right? Let them go. Make them feel good about leaving. Stay in touch with them, right? See how they're doing. All that sort of stuff. And there's a million ways to do that. So, yeah.
So what would you say is like the biggest, again, because of your perspective on everything, what would you say is kind of like the biggest untapped opportunity that you're seeing for people right now, regardless of what type of sales you're in, right? Like, because people in real estate sales, people in car sales, I mean, you train elite salespeople that are doing numbers all over the world that I can't even imagine.
Are we supposed to be drinking this?
If you want, man.
Like, oh, wait.
You know who took down this? That was Nelson. That was me and Nelson sitting right here.
That's great.
That was a time. That guy's awesome. And again, also just a cold reach out. I can't remember how, but he just reached out to me or I reached out to him. And same thing with Tom.
Yeah.
I remember this was years ago. I saw him at one of your events. I saw him speaking. I just Googled him. I found his phone number. I called him up. I said, hey, would you like to grab lunch? I really would love to pick your brain. And he was like, yeah. And we did. And I've been picking his brain and very openly trying to copy and steal his business model as much as I possibly can because I think it's so cool what he's doing. Even I asked him like, "Hey, would you come in for a podcast?" Like, guys are all the way downtown.
Yeah.
He's like, "Absolutely, I'm coming." Like, he's just so cool. Like, there's so many people like that.
Well, that's what I mean. And I think a lot of people, they think it's the opposite, but it's not. They want to help, right? They enjoy the opportunity. Um, Couple quick stories and I'll come back to your question, okay, about the opportunity. When I was 21 years old, I worked at a gas station and with my dad. And we had 3 stations, service stations. And we had like lube shops and pop shops and all this sort of stuff, right? And I started playing squash with a guy by the name of Terry Winder, who's still we're really good friends today. We're leaving in a week and a half, going to Spain together on a golf trip, right, with some other guys. And so I've known him for over 40 years, okay? And I started playing squash with him. And after squash, we just sit, when you finish, just sit on a bench, we just talk. Yeah, we're all sweating and we're tired and we're just talking away. And anyway, I started to learn that he was in the insurance business and he was a salesperson. And he'd been a salesperson since he was 17 years old. He's about 5 years older than me, so he would have been 26 maybe at the time. And I was so curious, right? I'm going, man, because he's driving a BMW. I'm driving like a old Datsun Nissan 500 that was painted with spray bombs from Canadian Tire. True story, right? And he's driving a BMW. So I got really curious. And I think curiosity is one of the greatest gifts in the world. You get around successful people, they tend to ask a lot of questions. So anyway, the more I got to know him, the more I started, because I knew nothing about sales. I didn't know anything about sales, right? I grew up in the gas business with my dad. And yeah, so he invited me to his office. And, how we get in it. He said, well, come down, we'll have a meeting. We had this meeting. And he goes, oh, yeah. He said, sales, you make a fortune in sales, right? And as they say, I think it was a sales association said this, that sales is the highest paid hard work, right? But the lowest paid easy work. So you can make a fortune in sales, but you got to have work ethic. You got to do the right things. If you just goof around, well, you're not going to make much. So I got into real estate because of Terry Winder, because he wanted me to sell insurance, but I wouldn't sell insurance because I didn't turn me on. I wanted to do something I liked. I always saw houses. So I ended up getting my real estate license through Terry Winder. Then the first listing I ever sold in my life, the listing agent was Dan Grady. Dan Grady at the time worked for Remax. He's now retired. And he was a number 1 agent in all of Peterborough. I started selling real estate in Peterborough. I went back with my deal the next day to my broker, Don Harriman, and I got all excited, my first deal, right? Hey, I sold the house and all that. And he opens a file and he goes, oh, it was Dan Grady's listing. I said, yeah. He said, what you should do? You should call him up and go for lunch with him. He's the number 1 agent. And I wasn't with Remax. I was with Century 21 at the time. So I said, oh, I could call him. Like, are you kidding me? How busy this guy is? Like, he doesn't have time for me. Like, he's driving around the big Mercedes, right? And he goes, well, all I can say is no. So think about this, Rich. He goes, if he says yes, you're a step ahead of where you were. If he says no, you're exactly where you were before. So who cares? You're going to be where you were. You're going to be a step ahead. So he goes, go and call him. So I called Dan. We went to a Chinese restaurant, almost like your story, right? Had a 2-hour lunch. We became fast friends, right? I'm still friends with him today. You know what I mean? Like, he taught me so much about marketing. I knew zero about marketing. And I was with a different company. So he says, oh, yeah, just here's what I would do. And he told me what I should do to start. And so I took his ideas and started doing it. So if I go back and look at my life, I look at Dana Richard, relationship, right? 40 years. Terry Wyndham, over 40 years, right? Like, if I go back and look at my life, is that my life, I'm standing on the shoulder of giants, right? Some people say, oh, you're the giant. I go, no, I'm not the giant. Not in my world, I'm not. I'm standing on the shoulder of giants. I learned from Joe Polish. I could phone Joe Polish right now, and Joe, I got a problem. What should you do? And we can go on and on about people, but that's the secret. But relationships need to be maintained. And that's what most people are not good at. They let them slide. They get weaker over time. And, like these 8 guys or 7 other guys I'm going golfing with, they're all buddies I've known for 35, 40 years. Like, we're a bunch of old golfers now. You know what I mean? But we still go away to some really cool place every 2 years. We don't go every year, but we'll go every 2 years to a really cool golf resort. We have the time of our lives, right? That's about building relationships. And what's interesting about these 8 guys that I'm going with, I do business with some of them. So in other words, I lend money with one guy for mortgages. We're making money together. We're better together. You know what I'm saying? Another guy's Terry Wyndham. He's sort of my, estate planner, if you will. Like I'm going like, these people have changed my life. I wouldn't know anything about lending money and mortgages, right? Because I'm so caught up in my business. Well, he's an expert at it, so I get involved with him. That sort of thing. So that's the power of relationships. Is you have a certain discipline. Well, they have different disciplines, and maybe we can profit together. Wouldn't that be cool? Maybe we can learn together. Wouldn't that be cool? Right? Maybe we can talk when we're down a little bit together. Wouldn't that be cool? Like, they're incredibly powerful. And I don't think people give enough importance to relationships because they're thinking about deals. They're transactional, not relational. I would say that if you look at a relationship as being transformational, and what that means to me is 1 + 1 = 2. But if you have a transformational relationship, 1 + 1 = 5. Right? So in terms of mortgages, I make, I make quite a bit of money in interest off mortgages because, see, 1 + 1 didn't equal 2 with Wayne and I, right? 1 + 1 = 5. And he comes to me for advice all the time, just like I go to him for advice. So that's what I mean by think about a relationship as how do I make it transformational, not transactional. Think about the LRS. The LRS, to me, Lifetime Referral System, was one of our founded. It's about creating transformational relationships. That's what it's about. Like you just said, you had an event.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why is a real estate agent having an event for the manicures or something?
Mother's Day manicure.
Mother's Day
We do it every year.
Well, why the hell is a real estate agent doing that? That's all you do. You should be out selling homes. No, because you're building transformational relationships. It's bigger than just selling a home. It's bigger than a commission check. So that's the way I think people need to think about how can I make them transformational? And understand giving starts the receiving. Don't wait for somebody else to start. You start. Right?
So in terms of like reaching out to people, what was something that you like it's so cool that you're paying it forward, right? Because like you're here, right? We have a really small channel, right? This is a small podcast. And I sent you a text and it was like, yeah, you know, how do you see paying it forward kind of like pay it back? Because ultimately, like I can reach out and people might say no for bigger guests and things like that. But then what would you say for paying it forward and the value in investing in younger people, people who are new to the industry, people in cross industries? Like what's been a success story for you that you've seen in that regard? Because I know you've seen so many careers develop and like how would you as a leader, how would you kind of like coach somebody who's looking to develop talent? It's a really difficult thing to do.
Develop their talent?
Develop any talent, like whether it's for their team
Right.
or just helping somebody out. Like that's a really difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
Like you run a coaching business.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, like you can't even get people to just do what you tell them to do.
Right.
Like the one thing that I've really gained it from your business as a customer of it, as a client, is stashing the ego and like actually just like doing what you say,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is like really huge. So like, but how do you get that? How do you get to that point where you can actually get someone from, hey, I see where you are, I've been there,
Right.
to like, you just need to do X, Y, Z,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to take the inner work
Mm-hmm.
of like stashing the ego to get there.
Mm-hmm.
How do you make those steps through someone and have them change?
It's a really good question, and I don't know if I got a perfect answer for it, but here's what I would say. I would say that we all have to understand that success is a bunch of small actions performed with consistency. I think a lot of people think, oh, there's some big thing you got to do, right? So, for instance, a podcast like we're doing here. You could do a podcast, 4 or 5 episodes, post it. That's not going to change anything, right? It's the consistency. of the podcast. It could be a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, right? Like, it's no different than when you look at open houses, just as an example. Well, some says, "Oh, I'm not very busy going to do an open house." I go, why don't you do an open house every weekend if you have a listing? If that's one of your channels, right? Might not be your channel. Or why don't you do one every Saturday and one every Sunday? Like, it's the consistency of what you need to figure out. So what I would say to your question is this: if I could identify where somebody is, which obviously as a coaching company, that's one of our goals, is okay, we got to start with where you are now. If we don't know where you are now, I can't get you where you want to go. It's like GPS has got to know where you are before it can give you directions, right? So, okay, so let's go through all of that. Let's have a great conversation about that. Find out what's going on, where your pains, all that sort of thing. And the second thing, I'll say, well, what do you really want? And I'm a big believer in asking, what do you want? Not what do you need? There's a big difference between wanting and needing, right? So a lot of people need money to make mortgage payments and car payments, look after kids and all that sort of thing. That's a need. The challenge with achieving a need is that you will generally only get your ass to work when you really need it, when there's pain, right? Because there's two motivators in the world. There's pain and pleasure, right? You're either moving away from something you don't want or moving towards something you want, right? And pain is a great motivator, by the way. And that's why you see so many real estate agents, their income goes up and down all the time, right? Because they're slumping, rolling, because once they got a bunch of money, they kick back and relax until they run out. And then the pain starts, right? And, they better get back to work again, right? And then they go back, right? And they work hard, and then they got some pendings again. Psh, they're done, right? They relax. So, those people are motivated by pain. Those people, to me, will not enjoy the business because, they work when they have to. They'd rather not, but they're doing because they have to. They're being pushed to do something because they need to produce a result to solve a problem in their life. The people that produce bigger results in the world are moving towards what they want. The lifestyle they want, right? The house they want. So literally say, okay, what do you really want? And if somebody can get really clear on that by just taking a journal or whatever the case, and just write down, what do you really want? Right? So in other words, if you said to me, you know what I really want? I just want the most deepest, loving relationship with my partner. I want it to be a killer relationship, right? Great. That's what you want. You and I could write down a lot of things you have to do to create that. Not them, you. What do you need to do, right? You start. You got to start it. And we could write a list. Pretty easy to do, right? And then we got to say, okay, well, what are the little actions that you can take every week that are going to move you towards having that relationship? Well, you better spend some FaceTime every week and just sit and talk. Because that's the foundation of a relationship, is communication. So why don't you plan a date night every single week? That's pretty simple to do, right? And if you do that, among maybe twice a week sending a nice loving message, a text, just small things, but done with consistency. If the relationship isn't good right now and you do that for 2 weeks, probably not going to change a lot. It'll change a little bit, won't change a lot. But if you do that for years, right? Like my wife and I, we have a great relationship, but we have a date night every single week. We go out and we talk a lot, right? And there's sometimes I don't feel like talking, but we talk because we need to, right? That's what communication is. So then somebody says, what do you really want? What do you really want? Well, I want to make $1 million a year. Okay. So why do you want to make $1 million a year? Well, if I make $1 million a year, because the why is more important than the how, right? Right? The why is your motivation. Why do you really want it? Why do you really want it? What is that inside of you that wants? And then you give me all the reasons you really, really want it. Okay? Write all those reasons down. And I would continue to review those reasons, right? On a daily, maybe at least weekly basis, right? To keep reminding yourself what you're creating. And then it's okay. Want to make $1 million? Perfect. What's your average commission? Well, it's $20,000 or $40,000 or whatever it is. Great. Divide it into 9. How many deals you got to do? We start to break it down. And we break it down. Now we know exactly how many deals. And then we could break that down further. How many appointments you need to do every week? Good. We got how many appointments you need to do every week. We got that all figured out. Now we got to decide what behaviors do you need to perform to make that happen? Because the results are only going to be produced by the behaviors every day. The small actions performed with consistency. right? And then you start performing those actions, whatever those lead generating ideas might be. And I would suggest you need to find ways to generate leads in a way that you enjoy, or you won't keep doing it. So we talked about years ago when you were real into online lead gen, you really didn't like that. It's not sustainable. Like, build a business and life you love, right? Let's build it in a way that you never think of a retirement. Well, you better like it then, right? So how do we do it? Okay, well, how are you gonna? Oh, I want to build a podcast, and I want to start putting out really, really good content. And if I put out great content and people start following it, then I'm going to be perceived as an authority in my space, and that'll be a great lead generating source. Great. Okay, there's one strategy. What's another one? So to me, that's the whole process with anything. You can do that with your physical being, your relationships, your money, but you got to be really, really clear. Damon John, Damon John, he's a pretty famous business guy. He was interviewed one day, and they said, "So what is your morning routine?" He goes, "Well, I like a little exercise," but he said, "The most important thing I do every morning is I go back and look at my goals. I got to remind myself every day of work, because a goal is just a destination, right? Goals like, you wake up in the morning, you say, okay, I got to drive from here to Mississauga. So your goal is to get to Mississauga. Well, you got to remember that. Otherwise, you don't have a plan, right? So now you make a plan to get from here to Mississauga. But the goal is Mississauga. Well, what's your goal? What kind of relationships do you want? How do you want to be physically, right? How do you want to be mentally? How do you want to be spiritually? Whatever is important to you, and different things to everybody. And then you got to look at your goals all the time, and then be really honest. Say, what I have planned today, is that moving me closer to my goals? So those small things with consistency over time will produce extraordinary results in the world. But I think to a degree, some people are just way too impatient, right? They do it for a couple weeks. Oh, it doesn't seem to be working. Yeah, it's been 2 weeks. Right? So they give up. Then they go to the silver bullet. There's got to be an easier way. One of the most important things I said to my kids is, I said, remember, the most important thing is you got to do the real work, right? The real work. And the real work are the behaviors that will produce results that you want to get. Because busyness is the easiest thing to do in the world, right? But the real work, is getting off your social media and doing the real work, whatever the real work is. So that would be my long answer.
That's kind of like a nice segue into something else I really wanted to ask you about, which is, I don't think it has much to do with business, but like, I'm a young guy. We're thinking about, building a family. You're a father, you're a grandfather.
So you want me to tell you how you have kids?
Yeah.
Hey?
Yeah. I need a step-by-step
All the birds and
instruction.
the bees.
What do you think would be like your best advice for parenting? Because like you got great kids, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, I'm blessed. I got great kids. Like, my wife and I talk about it all the time. They say you're only as happy as your unhappiest child, which is, I think that's a pretty true statement, right? If one of your children are really struggling, well, it's going to be hard for you as well. I would say, I think both my kids have great work ethic. And it was funny, I was working with my trainer this morning, and she was saying to me that, she was at this guy's house training him, and he's pretty successful, I guess, in some big property farm or something like that. And that, the kids just sort of live in the house and do nothing, right? And, she was going, oh, those kids should do this. They should get a job or whatever. I said, it's not the kid's fault. I hate to tell you. It's parents' fault. Right? Like, now maybe there's something wrong with the kids. I don't know that. So I'm not saying in this particular case, maybe they're dealing with some mental issues, or I don't know. This was just conversation. I said, it's the parents' fault. I said, I think what you have to do is, you can't spoil your kids and don't make their life too easy. Because if you make their life too easy, you make their life too hard. Right? Because then they think it's always going to be easy. My kids, I helped them a little bit with their homes, but I promise you, they got mortgages, and I want them to have mortgages, right? I want them to have to make those payments on those homes and figure out how to manage it, all those sort of things. So I think the whole idea is, number one, I think example's the greatest teacher in the world, right? Both my kids have really good relationships, thank God. But again, my wife and I have a really good relationship. Like there was never any anger in our house. It was always a pretty peaceful place to be. Um, I think kids would rather be, from a broken home than in a broken home sort of thing, right? So I think, the example that we give to our kids, greatest example you give them is, you know, as a father, love the mother, right? Um, so example, whether it's work ethic, whatever it is, right? Would be number one. Number two, which is the hardest thing to do, is you got to let them struggle a little bit. You've got to let them fall down. You got to let them make mistakes. Now be there to help them. Say it's okay. You know what I mean? Just try again. No big deal. You know what I mean? You're doing great. Effort is everything because effort is the responsibility we all have, right? To be successful in the world, we got to put in the effort. Um, so I would say, yeah, you don't make their life too easy because then you make their life too hard, which means what you've got to do is you've got to, as hard as it is as a parent, you got to let them struggle a little bit right along the way. Um, and I would say the other thing is just, love them unconditionally. And I know everybody hears that all the time, but kids just want to be hugged and they want to be loved and they want to know it's okay. And, yeah, if I get good marks, you'll love me. And if I don't get good marks, you don't. No, that's not it, right? Not it at all. It's like you love them as much, no matter what's going on. You want to encourage them the best you can. So, and I'm sure there's a million other things, but yeah, parenting is one of the coolest things in the world because here's the way I look at parenting. I look at parenting and I say, okay, you and your partner, you bring a child into the world, and this child is your greatest piece of art. It is your greatest piece of art because for really the first many years, you're going to mold that piece of art, right? By what you say to them, by what you show them, by the demonstrations and all the things you introduce them to. You're molding that child. You're molding their brain. You're molding their mindset, right? You're molding it all. Now, they're all going to have different strengths and weaknesses. We all know that. Um, but encourage their strengths. Let them know it's okay to find something you're good at, right? And double down on that. You don't spend your life doing a bunch of things that you don't enjoy, that sort of thing. So that's what I mean by work of art. I think it's just the coolest little thing, right? So you've heard the story about Be Do Have, right? With my daughter.
Oh yeah.
Mm.
That's phenomenal. I had to take that lesson to heart. Um, I've been to half a dozen events of yours at least over the years. And I'll hear this stuff year after year. And then some years it's like I find a gold nugget in this, and other years I find a gold nugget in that. When it was the same thing that I heard year over year, but it didn't click at that time for some reason. Like there was something in my life where for some reason I resonated more with this message and not with that message. And the be do have, I remember it was maybe 3 years ago when I went off and built my own business on my own. It was at that moment that that really connected with me and it sunk in
Yeah.
and it changed my business completely.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, can you just explain what that means to people? It's a really cool philosophy.
Yeah. Well, first of all, that's why I encourage people to go to events over and over and over and over again because, it's like the old saying, right? The student is ready, the teacher will appear. Well, we're all different stages. So, we're stimulated by an idea when the idea can be used for us. And then our mind goes to work. If we're sitting at an event. "Oh, that's a good idea. When should I do that? And how much would that cost?" Well, you're not hearing everything that's going on after that, right? Because you get stimulated by a thought. It's like watching a movie for a second time. You see things you didn't see the first time, right? Read a book for a second time. So that's why it's, personal development to me is something that should never end, right? Because you just never know when you're going to be ready to get that idea. So the whole be do have theory is all based on the fact that, a lot of people are trying to have, right? And they think, okay, if I want to have, then I'll do, and then I'll be. So I'll explain that. So, once I have more money, then I'll give more to charity, and then I'll be known as a generous person, right? But that's backwards. That's not the way it works, right? Life doesn't flow from have to be to do. Life flows from be to do to have, right? So the whole idea is this, is we got to choose who we're going to be. So I'm going to be generous. And if I'm going to be generous, what would I do? Well, maybe I would save 10% of my income. Or maybe I would give away. So we're talking about charity. Maybe I would give away 10% of my income. Or maybe I get involved in a charity. It doesn't have to be money. It can be anything, right? But then what would I do? Just ask yourself, if I want to be a generous person, which I can change in the moment, right? I can choose to be generous in this moment. I don't have to wait to have it. I can choose to be financially responsible now, even though I wasn't before. I can choose to be healthy now, even though I wasn't before. So that's what's really cool about it, is you can actually change in a moment. So you say, and I'm just using the whole, be generous thing, then what would I do? Just write down on it, what could I do? If I want to be a generous person, what could I do? And then pick something and do it. And then you'll have whatever it ends up you have, right? So we don't control the have, because the have is a result. We control the do, our behavior, and we fully control the be, because we can choose to be whoever we want to be in any given moment. So anyway, when my kids were young, I used to, when they get up in the morning and before they went to school, I was saying, "What are you going to do today?" Right? And they'd look at me and, say in a cocky way, "Oh, we're going to be happy. We're going to do our best and we're going to have fun." Right? That's what they would say. And I used to joke with them all the time, "Why, we better tell your face, because your face doesn't look like you're being happy right now, right?" "Well, Dad, you ask us that every single day, all that." So anyway, and it was sort of fun. And of course, my theory was, today, just be happy. Just be happy, right? And whatever you choose to do, I want you to do your best. And I think that if you be happy and you do your best, you're going to have fun, right? And I go, that's a pretty good day. Be happy. Whatever I choose to do today, I'm going to do my best and I'm going to have fun. So I have 2 grandchildren now, 5 and 3. So a couple of years ago, my daughter sent me a video, and it's my oldest at the front door. And my daughter saying to him, "So what are you going to do today?" And he's going, "I'm going to be happy and I'm going to do my best and I got to have fun." And I thought it was so cool, because it's like another generation, right? From something that I taught my daughter. And now my daughter's doing it with my grandchildren. And I just think it's so cool. So as much as she fought me on it, and this was a parenting thing, right? As much as she fought me on it and never really wanted to say it, but guess what? It's in there. Right, it's in there. It's like an affirmation every day, and now she's doing it with her kids, because now she realizes, like, that it's somewhat important, right, with your kids. So that's the whole idea behind the be, do, have theory, which I know a lot of people have heard about, but most people, they're going from have to do to be, which means it's like swimming upstream. It's like you're swimming into the current rather than with the current. When you go from be to do to have, you start moving with the current, and life gets a lot easier. Doesn't mean there's gonna be no problems. Life gets a lot easier, right? I want to be helpful. Every day, be helpful. Produce content that's helpful to people, right? Somebody's struggling, they don't know what to do, be helpful. You got a friend struggling, call them up, be helpful, right? Be useful. Another great way to look at it. But so many people are chasing the end game, the money, right? The deals, celebrity, right? Recognition. And I see that in social media today, where a lot of people, I think they'd rather be well known than well paid, right? Which is sort of a little weird to me, but I guess, a lot of people like to be celebrities, and that's cool. I'll take well paid any day of the week, right? Sort of over well known. So yeah, anyway, that's where I'd go, the whole be, do, have is just decide who I want to be, and you can sit down in a journal and write down, I want to be this, I want to be this, I want to be that in the industrial. Well, if that's who I am, if that's who I truly am as a human being, then what would I do? Right? And then once you decide what you would do, then you have to release the have, allow it to come into your life. It's more of an attraction process than a pursuing process, if you will.
That's so cool that that Jamie's now doing it with her kids.
Yeah.
I love that, and I love the kind of the older I get, the wiser my father gets,
Yeah, yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah.
What's a cool lesson you got from your dad?
Work ethic will overcome a lot of problems. My dad used to say that to me all the time. He used to always say, "Son, work ethic will overcome a lot of problems in your life." And my dad was really hard work. He was an amazing human. He actually was one of my coaches for a long time. Yeah, he coached for our company for a long time. And yeah, he was my biggest supporter. Always believed in me, even though he didn't agree with a lot of my decisions. I was a bit of a rebel. I'm the oldest of 4, and he didn't understand why I wanted to get into the gas station business, right? Because he did it his whole life, pensions, all that sort of stuff, right? oh, you have a pension, and he didn't understand why I really wanted to be an entrepreneur, right? Because, he worked for Shell Canada. Didn't understand why I wanted to leave Peterborough and move to Toronto to open a real estate company where I didn't know anybody, which was sort of crazy, but I wanted to do that. And he used to always say to me, he goes, I don't understand why you're going to do that, but I know you're going to make it. He says, because you have the ability to do whatever you want. And I know that about you. Like, that's the type of stuff he used to say to me all the time, right? He said, you're one of the most determined people I've ever met in my life. And so he was very encouraging with me. He never shut me down, right? Yeah, and I think my dad instilled confidence and self-esteem in me, which is valuable, right? Like, my God, it's valuable. Imagine someone being told that they can't do anything their whole life. And I know that happens. So, yeah, so I was really blessed. Both my parents are amazing, amazing humans. Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah, my dad's like my best friend.
Yeah.
He's said to me similar stuff where, he would always tell me, the universe can be a real scary place,
Yeah.
but I have full confidence in you to go out there and you'll handle yourself just fine.
Yeah.
He'd say stuff like that to me and similar things. I'm finding like there's a lot of parallels that I'm hearing. Like my dad would always say to me, no matter what you do in your life, Adam, you're going to work hard.
Yeah.
Whether you're a janitor or you're a CEO of some major company,
Yeah.
you're going to work hard. So it's best to get paid well for the hard work that you're going to do anyways.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. He would say to me and kind of encourage me to be independent and go out there and kind of take those risks and, understand that like, hey, it's dangerous. Like, it's not like this world is all sunshine and rainbows. However,
Yeah.
like you got a kid, like you're going to be just fine.
Yeah.
That was all those words have really stuck with me. It seems like they've stuck with you too
Yeah.
over the decades. And that's a really cool thing. I guess like, I'd love to know, like, what can I do to kind of like pay it forward to you or to others who are like kind of just out there? Because I think it's so cool. I've gained so much from your organization,
Mm-hmm.
from guys like Bill and Tom and other people who are now lifelong friends who I've been friends with for many years,
Mm-hmm.
who I met through like your program. Um, like what's something cool that I could do to kind of like pay it forward or like kind of give back to the community? I've always like thought about that. Like, I don't know really what it is that I can contribute. Like, I don't know.
Well, number one is be successful, right? Because, you're involved in our company and all that, and we want to see you succeed in any way you want to succeed. I would say that would be number one. And the second thing, get as deeply involved in the community as you can, right? Like, like you talk about how Tom helps you, right? Who can you help? Who can you reach out to? Who can you be assistance to? And as you start to enjoy success, I think it's important that we help other people along the way, right? We help people up because there's a lot of people out there struggling right now, or just the industry as a whole, right? Help the people that are struggling. We all grow faster together. There's no question about that, right? And it's nice to have support of other people that have already been down that path, if you will. See, I get deeply involved in the community. Like, would be great.
Done.
Great.
Consider it done. Richard, you're a legend in the industry, and I'm super honored that you took the time out of your busy schedule to come down here and chat with me. So, yeah, I'm like at a loss for words and like super like kind of starstruck. I'm like, holy shit, it's Richard Robbins. Okay, Adam, be cool, be cool. Like Richard Robbins coming on the podcast.
Believe
Uh,
me, my wife doesn't look at me that way. My friends don't look at me that way. My kids don't look at me that way. And you don't need to look at me that way. I would say that we all wake up in the morning. We got to realize this, buddy. And thank you for all your kind words. It's much appreciated. But at the end of the day, if you take all of your clothes off and have a look in the mirror, it's not pretty.
I think I look pretty good.
You look pretty good.
I work out pretty hard.
Okay,
man.
let me just say it. Let me just say mine's not so pretty, right?
No,
But
you look great.
but I do. I look at it and I say, at the end of the day, we all put on our pants the same way. We all put on our shoes the same way. And by the way, I would have felt the same when I was younger, but what I've come to see is that every time now I look at somebody, no matter where they are in their life, I go, they're just a human, right? They have many struggles in their life, right? Like we all do. And so I think it's, I appreciate everything you're saying, but yeah, at the end of the day, I was thinking to myself, like, I want to ignite lives. That's my purpose, right? Like I want to light a fire in people, not under people. That's my driving force every day is how can I light a fire in people, not under them. Like when I wrote the talk yesterday, that is my thought. I'm always thinking, okay, what can I say today that's going to light a fire in somebody, right? Because in somebody is going towards something you want. Under somebody is rolling through fear, right? And that's the difference in my mind. Um, because if you can get people charged up inside, then yeah, they can do great things.
It's a cool thing to remember, and I'm definitely going to be reaching out to more people who I look up to and try to like have
Yeah,
chats with them on here because I find I'm learning so much, and it kind of reminds me like what you said reminds me of Marcus Aurelius.
yeah,
Um, is that one thing that he did I thought was so I mean, the guy's brilliant and I loved meditations, but like one thing he did that was so cool was Marcus Aurelius had one slave who had one job only,
right,
and that was to stand behind him at all times.
yeah,
And whenever there would be somebody who'd come, see the Caesar, bow or talk him up or anything like that, is this one slave's job was to whisper into his ear, "You're just a man."
right,
And like, it's a cool, it's an interesting humility to hear,
yeah,
like from people who I look up to so much that I think is really a core value that
yeah.
I just I absolutely love it. So yeah, man, I just want to say thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, really appreciate your insight. The chance to have like a one-on-one where I can kind of just pick your brain has been an incredible opportunity. Very grateful. So I'm definitely gonna pay it forward. And next time we'll crack it open, when it's not like so early in the day. We'll wait until it's past 3 p.m. or something. But yeah, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure, man. Pleasure.